Hello, Brian Pierce with the Pierce Brothers. Today we're going to talk about the George Lawrence number 120, or what is more commonly known as the Keith number 120 holster. This is a very historic holster. Of course, Elmer Keith needs no introduction from fellow handgunners and big bore 6-gun shooters. This particular one is the very first George Lawrence number 120 made, and it is from the collection of Elmer Keith. It doesn't get much better than that. We'll discuss that more in a moment, but let's go back and do a little bit of history on the 120 and how it came about. Last week we did a video on Tom Three Persons, in El Paso, Native American gunfighter, policeman, various agents, and various soldier, by the way. But he was a very, and in the words of Charlie Askins, he was a real gunfighter. Let's just not quote Charlie too close, because he gets pretty colorful. But he was a holy terror with a gun. Going into a gunfight, he was the real thing. And he designed for the Sam Myers Company, or S.D. Myers, what became known as the Three Persons holster, or the Model 1920 as it's known today. Very simple design. And before we get to Elmer Keith's design, which was very, very similar to it, I want to take and read a small excerpt from his book, Six Guns by Keith. Any revolver or 6-gun shooter should read this. It's a 1955 Stackpole book. It's a standard reference work, and it's a classic. It's entertaining. The principles that Keith teaches in it are timeless. But I just want to verify, because one thing that I've noticed is that a lot of people say, well, Elmer Keith copied Tom Three Persons holsters. Well, no, he didn't, but he kind of added some features that he wanted himself. So I'll just read briefly what he had to say. He says, this is page 151. Years ago, we designed a holster for the Colt single action for the Lawrence Company, known as the number 120 holster. This carries the butt well forward for heavy glove fastener to be used when working cattle or riding a bucking horse. The long strap can be folded down behind the belt when not needed. The belt loop extends down only far enough to be well stitched. The holster offers a minimum weight and above the belt. It is our favorite holster for the single action Colt when either worn on a gun belt or waist belt, and can be made either right or left-handed as desired. Myers also has their famous Tom Three Persons design that is almost identical, except that the belt loop is extended down the bottom of the holster and sewn around the bottom. This is a slightly heavier holster and offers exactly the same perfect gun position. It is made either right or left hand and can be had with safety strap if desired. Myers also makes them with extended top to protect the clothing from wear by the hammer, but we do not favor this addition, as it might slow one up with the single action gun. I know it would slow me up considerably with a single action, but is okay for the double action gun. Their number 610 and 614 are typical examples of the excellent Tom Three Persons design. So I could go on, but I won't. The point is that Keith admired the Tom Three Persons design. He actually used them before he designed the Model 120. So going back briefly, the Three Persons was designed, sources vary on this, but I believe it was between 1920 and 22. So Elmer Keith's design, he designed for the George Lawrence Company in 1937. And this holster first appeared in their catalog. The earliest reference I could find was 1940. So it's a gorgeous layout. This one, of course, rawhide laced, hand carved. It's just a beautiful rig. Now, Elmer had an 1870s era Colt single action, a black powder gun that he was shooting smokeless powder loads in, but we won't discuss that today. But what he did, this holster has one modification that he made, and as you can see, this Colt that he had a Smith & Wesson end frame rear sight put on it, a banded front. This is pictured in his book, Six Guns. It's been pictured in many articles, but he took and cut this out slightly to accommodate that rear sight. So that was the only modification made to this holster. Other than that, Keith signed off on it, approved of it, and there it is. So he had it built up for his number 5 as well as his 7.5 inch short action. And here's actually a gun from the Elmer Keith collection with a number 120 holster that his 7.5 inch flat top target 44 special. This gun was originally a .450 caliber, and he sent it back to Colt in 1929, and they re-barreled it and re-cylindered it to 44 special. Again, this has been pictured in many Guns and Ammo magazine articles, and his book 6 guns. And if you look at this particular holster, you can see it's got the welt here, actually a skived welt. If you look close, you can see the taper as it goes down and it also has a sight protector built into it. And so this one would encase that flat top target rear sight and protect it. And actually, if you've ever carried on a horse or whatever, one of these guns that sight sticks out, they can scrape the inside of your arm pretty regular, and this protects you from that. So again, there's a beautiful carved example of the Lawrence 120. This is another one. This is Elmer Keith's actual Blackhawk 41 Magnum, serial number 67, and this became his favorite gun, actually, and most people don't know this, but to hunt jackrabbits up in the Passamaquoddy Valley. And Lawrence, of course, modeled this one as the number 576, meaning the Ruger large frame Blackhawk. And again, that's from the Elmer Keith collection. Another one that might be interesting from the Elmer Keith collection is a really early Super Red Hot or Super Single 6. This one, interestingly, high-grade factory wood, but it came with an XR3 grip frame rather than the XR3 Red. And this is a great little gun. Shoots wonderful. And again, the gun is from the Elmer Keith collection, and the holster is, of course, a George Lawrence Ruger Super Single 6. And yeah, another thing that Elmer he was talking about in the book, and kind of important to understand, is that the original 3-person design came down here and took in more leather to sew and support that belt loop. The Keith design was very small, double stitched, and honestly, I think that was actually a weak spot, in my opinion. I've had a number of these holsters that would become loose or whatever, and he had to be repaired. This one seemed to give a little more support, the 3-persons did. So even though that was a specific design change, the other thing that Keith wanted, 3-persons did not want the safety strap. He wanted everything out of the way so nothing would encumber the speed of the draw to get that gun out of the holster in a gunfight. Keith, on the other hand, of course, he was a townsman. Don't take that wrong, but 3-persons was a townsman. He worked in cities. That's where he lived. Keith, on the other hand, was a mountain man. He lived in the mountains of Salmon, Idaho. At the time he designed this, he was in an area called North Fork, which is starting the ascent from the Idaho-Montana border, which is the Continental Divide. It's high country. It's mountainous country. It's timbered country. And he packed and guided, and he wanted a long safety strap, which I should actually be using this as the gold standard. He wanted a long strap here so it was easy to get to, but he also indicated that you could position that out of the way if you wanted no encumberment, like if you were going to go to a town, a big city like the size of Salmon. I'm being sarcastic. Salmon's a very, I think there's only 3,000 people in the entire county. That's a big county, Lemhi County. But those were some of the changes he made. It's a classic design. It's a wonderful design. Lawrence, a couple of things I've noticed in having many 3-persons holsters built by S.D. Myers and El Paso, particularly during the vintage that Keith did this, is that the George Lawrence Company used a thicker, heavier leather than S.D. Myers did. At least on the 3-persons that I've compared to the Lawrence had heavier leather. They boasted of being steer hide and one reference bull hide, which is thicker yet, but it was thicker, heavier leather. But Lawrence's workmanship was wonderful. Even this post-war one, this one being for a Colt New Frontier. Look at the quality of that lacing and the carving and so forth. And they cut this one out to open up for the the rear sight channel and the flat top frame. There's a pre-war holster, an early one, in an old 3840 Colt pre-war. Again, the quality of them was very, very good. Now, what's interesting, though, I might point out, they, of course, did double action ones. Here's one for a Smith K22 Outdoorsman, which those are phenomenal guns, super accurate. I'll put those against so many modern guns from a standpoint of accuracy. But the 120 was also a favorite rig of his, of Elmer Keith's, in the for double action revolvers. Here we have one in a Smith & Wesson Model 2444 Special, and that's a very very classic rig. That's actually a 34F, which is a spin-off of the 120. Of course, here we have the 120F, meaning the F meaning floral, in a Smith Model 29, and again, the quality and workmanship of these holsters were wonderful. And so it's yeah, that's a truly great design that bridged from the Frontier into the modern times, like the three-persons holster. Again, Keith had great admiration for the original three-persons design. He just wanted certain improvements. One thing that I was going to mention too, I've always kind of thought that, judging from my firsthand use of Lawrence versus three-persons holsters, I've always thought that Elmer had designed the Lawrence 120 that dropped down just a little bit more, meaning the position of the hammer in relation to the belt, than the three-persons. But going back to the earliest three-persons made in the early 1920s, it's actually not true. They were both very similar in that area. That was a change that occurred as they'd modify patterns, whether it was easier for them to produce holsters, I don't know, but they changed design. So for example, here's a holster that is one of the very last Lawrence 120s made. It's literally brand new, but you can see they've cut the front low to accommodate adjustable sights if necessary, although they still did the New Frontier at the same time, but they changed a few little small details. Now this one's skived here and it's not fully welted, so there were changes to them. The angle is just right in my opinion in relation to the belt on that one, but again, that was literally one of the very last holsters they built right before they went out of business. Golden Goodrich, I believe, bought them, and they never produced a holster again under the George Lawrence name. I think they mainly wanted the equipment, which is a sad thing, because it was a very, very savvy company. They made a huge variety of stuff, from rifle scabbards to a variety of holsters, fast draw holsters, Hollywood style. I mean, you name it, they did it. They even made saddles. In fact, I had a George Lawrence 120, a George Lawrence saddle as a bronc saddle. Started my son Porter on, especially when he started breaking horses, and he loves that saddle. Has perfect shape on the swells. I mean, everything flows on that saddle. He rode it hard for many years, and now he's finally put it away for his daughter to ride when she gets a little older. Keep it in the family, if you will. But yeah, that's the Lawrence 120. We'll try to get you some photos of the Keith number 5 holster as well. Mike Baranti of Baranti Leather is actually doing an exact duplicate of that Lawrence 120 that Keith did for the number 5 revolver. Again, there were many changes in the 120 over the years. Some of them I liked, some I didn't. I actually threw this holster in because it's actually lined inside and out with leather. And but one thing it does, it tends to pitch the gun away, and that's a 357 mag, a pre-war, actually, pretty rare gun, but it pitches the gun a little further away from the body. I kind of didn't like that. That's one of the reasons that Keith and Skelton, neither one opted for lined holsters. They wanted plain leather. Now, with that said, the proper lining can be fine in them, but I'm actually very fond of El Paso Saddlery's pigskin lining. It's thin. It doesn't seem to change the shape of the holster at all, the width and the bendability of it, but or the flexibility, I should say. So, but there you have it. Classic holster. You can still get more or less the same holster with El Paso Saddlery today and a few other makers. Of course, that's the 3-persons, the 120, the Keith 120 is long gone, but that's how and why Elmer Keith designed it the way he did. So, thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next time on the Pierce Brothers.